what we have here is spy images of what could be the next generation 2021 Ford Raptor, but it looks ordinary on the outside, but there's something going on underneath.
Yeah, I think we've got a unique inside look. Before you're supposed to see it, at the future of the F-150 Raptor suspension, we're talking coil springs, we're talking a bunch of changes. Now let's go right into what we think is going to be the 2021 F-150 Raptor.
Yeah, from the outside it looks just like a regular, normal 2019 Ford Raptor you could buy right now, but the rear suspension is obscured. There's a lot of covers on it, and one thing becomes really obvious right away. There are no leaf springs in the back.
Yeah, so currently the Raptor has leaf springs in the rear, but based on these photos you can see they've tried to hide them, but it's very poor kind of disguise, if you will, because you can clearly see through this tarp what appears to be coil springs. The leaf springs are gone.
Yeah.
We've got the solid rear axle. This, of course, is a picture of the back. And there's no more leaves.
Yeah, and what Ford's been doing, obviously, they've been improving or, adding to the Ford Raptor. Right? For 2019, they added live valve shocks, which are basically active Fox shocks, which is a really cool technology. But it looks like they're going further, and it looks like, well, first of all, coil springs, why would you do this? And I think one reason is they went to this design or similar design with a new Ford Ranger Raptor.
Right.
With coil rear suspension, but it's still a solid axle. This is not an independent setup.
Yeah, and with the coil springs here, potentially you could have a lot more travel. You can have a lot more benefits for high-speed running versus a leaf spring.
Yeah.
A lot of tunability as well that they could be going under with the coil spring.
Yeah.
And I know it's kind of not the norm for the F-150, but I think if you're running off-road at high speeds, this could be a huge advantage for this truck.
Yeah, and also maybe soaking up those little jumps or bigger jumps in this case.
Yeah.
And so there's two things going on. First, coil. Then the shock is still there. It looks like still they're maybe using Fox shocks.
Yep, so the current Fox shocks are orange.
Yeah.
This is how sciencey we're getting. And in the pictures, they're also orange. So it might still be using the same kind of live wire Fox shocks.
Yeah.
But what's crazy is you never get to see underneath trucks like this, and you can see on the outside it's very camouflaged underneath, but someone who sent us these photos was bold enough to kind of crawl under there with the camera.
And take a snap a photo.
Yeah.
And another thing that's really obvious now is in the front of the rear axle, there's a trailering arm. Also, sometimes people call them traction bars.
Yeah.
It's basically locating the axle. And another thing that's attached to the axle is kind of a bar that goes along the axle. And the Ranger Raptor is using what's called a Watts link rear suspension with a solid axle that kind of centers the axle and doesn't allow the axle to move because leaves actually help locate the axle, right?
Right.
But if you remove them, you have to have another solution. So they could potentially be using some sort of other design or similar to Watts.
Yeah.
And also trailing arms that also should eliminate axle hop.
And it looks to be it looks to be a pretty long arm setup, and you can see that they're pretty darn beefy. Looks like we have some holes drilled in them potentially for weight or strength, more likely.
Yeah.
And we also have some other things going on with this Raptor. If you look at the outside, there are microphones right outside the exhaust tips.
Yes.
So potentially they are developing and tuning for sound as well.
Yeah, and actually we had another TFL truck viewer in Denver, Colorado send us another image of very similar prototype Ford Raptor, and he was telling me that it still sounded like a V6
Gotcha.
EcoBoost. There are a lot of rumors of it getting a supercharged V8 or a giant 7.3 V8.
Right.
But the prototype we saw, or our friends saw in Denver, still sounded like a V6. They are using microphones to tune for sound. And also they're rerouting actually the exhaust pipes because the leaves are gone, so there is more space there, so they can adjust the way that the rear dual exhaust system is placed.
I think it's interesting that there's all this speculation about the 7.3 or a supercharged V8 going into Raptor. I really don't think it's true because if Ford was going down the route of kind of the big block V8 or the supercharged V8s, so the new Ford GT, their Halo car, would have had a V8, but instead it has a twin-turbo V6. The current Raptor is a twin-turbo V6. This chassis has largely been developed for the twin-turbo V6, so I really do see them sticking with that kind of tried-and-true power plant.
Yeah, the only argument against that is the GT500 Mustang.
Yeah, I agree.
That's using the new supercharged V8, and I think all the enthusiasts kind of want that engine in this truck, but we still don't know.
Yep. So clearly someone broke through the camo and was able to get these unique shots. But other things we notice, it's still running the BFG KO2s.
Yes.
A pretty similar wheel design to what they have right now. And the overall truck design is still the same. So it's still the basic cab and front end and rear end that the current Raptor has, which is pretty old now, right? Because they facelifted the F-150 in, what was it, 18? But the Raptor didn't get that facelift, and now we're in 19, and it still doesn't have the facelift.
And the 2020 order guide for the F-150 came out, and there are no changes seemingly in that, including the engine choices.
Right.
So this could be a 2021 update, and they might probably update the body of it as well, or the front end at least.
Yeah, that could be. So right now, the Raptor is kind of in a class of its own in terms of capability. You've got the Trail Boss, and you also have the Rebel that kind of slot in below it, slightly above an FX4. But that could change in the coming months and weeks.
Yeah, because the TRX, Rebel TRX is rumored. There's some prototypes running around that we've seen, and it's on our channel as well.
Yep.
And the rumor about the TRX is it's also using a coil rear axle setup. So Raptor and Ford may be looking at that and saying, okay, we can improve our current setup.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and do it.
Well, that's because the current Ram in the 1500
uses a 5-link rear,
right?
Which is a coil spring suspension too.
Yeah, so I could definitely see Ford going that way. The question is, are they going to put that coil spring setup that we see on this Raptor into other F-150 models? Like if you go and buy an XLT in the coming years, is that also going to have coil springs?
Yeah, I think there may be some resistance to that from the consumers and truck buyers, but we'll have to wait and see because they're also introducing a hybrid F-150 next year, and in a couple of years' time, maybe an all-electric one.
Right.
So mind blown, kind of.
Right. A lot of stuff going on here.
Yeah.
So let us know in the comment section below, what would you like to see out of the new Raptor? And are you at all a little bit hesitant to see this move toward the coil springs if this is in fact the direction we're going? We also think that they may be doing coil springs on the new Tundra as well, right?
Yeah, because that rear suspension is also camouflaged and covered, and nobody has climbed underneath it yet.
I mean, the other benefit, yeah, right? The other benefit I see with coil springs is they tend to, at least on the Ram trucks, be pretty comfy. When you're not towing or you're not loaded up, they've got kind of a nice squishy ride, and you can have squishy leaf springs as well, but then it kind of becomes a harder challenge to tow with squishy leaf springs.
And sometimes the coil rear suspension, when you load it really heavy with a trailer, it tends to kind of want to wander just a little bit.
That's the downside.
But a Raptor is not for towing.
Right.
So Raptor is for jumping dunes and doing all this stuff. So maybe that's the right application.
Now the question is, right now the Raptor is the go-to off-road Ford truck. We've heard that we're going to see the Bronco in the coming months.
Yes.
What do you think they're going to do with that one? Is that going to be the off-road desert runner, or is that going to be more of like a rock crawler?
It may be a combination of things because, the Ranger Raptor is in the other countries, other markets on sale, using a coil rear setup. The Ford Everest SUV in other markets using a very similar coil setup.
Right.
So I just don't know. We can't speculate yet.
Right.
But it could be using coils as well.
It could, and I'm actually wondering if they're going to go more toward the Rubicon buyer. The Wrangler, the hardcore, let's go tackle the boulders, or if they're going to go more toward the Raptor buyer, which is we've got a big stretch of desert.
Let's run fast.
Let's see how fast we can run it. Now, the other news that Ford is doing in the off-road truck segment is the Tremor, which you just saw at the Texas State Fair.
Yeah, the 2020 Super Duty Tremor. That's more of a heavy-duty truck, and they try to balance capability with off-roadability. You know how the Ram Power Wagon is focused purely on off-roading, and it's losing payload and towing capability in the Power Wagon. The new Tremor has over 4,200 pounds of payload capability.
Which is a lot.
Which is crazy amount of payload. Can you imagine just putting a camper on there, loading it up with all your stuff and going off-road? That's going to be a lot of fun. And also a lot of towing, like 15,000 pounds of towing.
But that was an HD truck.
It's an HD truck, and it's using unique shocks, but still leaf springs.
Yeah, so that one is definitely aimed more at the towing market.
Yeah.
Raptor was running leafs first gen up until now.
Yeah.
If we see a future of that, maybe the Raptor's towing capacity is still going to remain low, with the Tremor kind of sitting much higher above it as the towing king, and then this can be strictly the off-road, go anywhere, let's go have fun truck. And then Bronco is just a total wild card. So we'll see what they do there.
Yeah, so there's a lot of fun coming up, at least in the truck world.
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So be sure to stay tuned here to the Fastly Now and also TFL Truck because we've got a lot more Ford news coming up.
Yep, and go back to tfltruck.com for all the specs. We have all the specs there.
Yep, and for more detailed pictures that you can just kind of stew at for a long time, let them marinate, go over to tfltruck.com as well.
Thanks.